Hello everybody. So 2nd June 2026 onwards, Jupiter is moving into Cancer. So general prediction is heavy rain. Heavy rain in the sense it's not just a simple heavy rain. It's a more than a heavy rain all over the world. So in classical mundane astrology, that is the astrology that predicts world events and weather, this particular event, Jupiter transiting Cancer, which generally happens once in every 12 years, but this time Jupiter came to Cancer very early, you can say. He's supposed to come after 2 years roughly, but Jupiter entered Cancer, is going to enter Cancer on 2nd June. This year itself, it's an early call. And this can trigger incredibly heavy, historically significant rainfall. But of course, not everywhere in the world at once. So when we analyze ancient texts, or according to Vedic astrology, they don't predict a uniform blanket of rain over the entire globe, and it is not possible also. One part of the world is hit by heavy rain. You may not expect the same rain in the other part of the globe. Instead, they look at macro planetary alignments that trigger extreme hydrological imbalances, causing severe flooding and torrential monsoons in some regions, while leaving others strangely dry. So the specific alignments we discussed in the previous video, or let's simply say this, with in addition to the existing planetary positions, Jupiter transiting Cancer from 2nd June onwards, these positions, they create a kind of textbook astrological recipe for major water disruptions. So ancient astrological treatises like Bruhat Samhita or Vashishta Samhita, they outlined some specific triggers for massive rainfall, and the 2nd June 2026 chart hits almost all of them simultaneously, you can say. Jupiter generally rules Akasha Tattva, the space or the sky element, and acts as a cosmic amplifier. That is the general behavior of Jupiter. And Cancer is a cardinal watery sign ruling oceans, rivers, clouds, and moisture. When Jupiter enters Cancer on 2nd June 2026, it is hit with maximum strength, that is exaltation. Jupiter is generally very, very comfortable. It's a kind of doing party in Cancer. There's no limits for Jupiter here. Astrologically, this expands the atmospheric capacity to hold and drop water. So if you observe some of the classical texts, they explicitly stated when Jupiter enters the sign of the crab, that is Cancer, with strength, the earth is blessed with abundant water. Rivers overflow their banks and crops flourish. That is the general expectation. And In addition to this Jupiter transiting Cancer, I am also seeing Mercury entering Ardra Nakshatra. So, this is the hidden trigger in our planetary positions right now. On 2nd June, Mercury would be in Ardra Nakshatra around 7 degrees Gemini. So, in Vedic weather forecasting, the Ardra Pravesha, which is generally Sun transiting Ardra, is called as Ardra Pravesha, is where people used to expect the rainfall in ancient times. Even see, Mercury is very nearer to Sun. As Sun, Mercury, when they are in Ardra, you can say kind of monsoon bulletin. Ardra is ruled by Rahu and symbolized by a teardrop. It represents the sky breaking open into violent storms and downpours. That is Ardra basically. And Mercury entering this zone acts as an immediate trigger for sudden turbulent weather shifts and fast moving storm fronts. And another important thing I can see here is Saturn transiting Revati Nakshatra, Saturn in Pisces. While Jupiter enters a watery sign, Saturn is already sitting at 17 degrees Pisces, another deep ocean watery sign. When multiple major slow moving planets like Jupiter and Saturn occupy watery signs simultaneously, it creates a planetary moisture trap in the atmosphere. So, obviously, it is signaling years of intense maritime storms, typhoons, and coastal flooding as well. See, because the world is geographically diverse, this water energy will manifest as extreme localized flooding and hyper intense monsoon seasons rather than a worldwide flood. I would say this Jupiter in Cancer, this June 2026, extreme downpours, it's intense South Asian monsoons, we can see, coastal flooding or typhoons, oversaturation of soil, we can observe, and I can also say some severe dry spells. We get a chance to see severe dry spells, something like where moisture is drawn, sudden severe droughts, record-breaking heat waves, wildfire risks in dry zones. This is in some part of the world, but in another part of the world you can definitely see, as we discussed, extreme downpours, because these two are two extremes. So whatever weather conditions you see in one part of the globe, you would see extreme downpours. So to balance it somewhere in the world, in other part of the globe, this extreme downpours would be balanced by some severe dry spells. Regions like India, Bangladesh and Southeast Asia will likely experience an incredibly heavy, potentially destructive monsoon season right as this transit takes hold in June. So June, the rain. Rivers are highly likely to overflow. I can clearly tell you, because see, Jupiter expands things. That is a fundamental behavior of Jupiter. It causes atmospheric extremes also. It pulls moisture heavily into storm tracks, which means, while one coast faces historic hurricanes or atmospheric rivers, inland areas might experience intense compressed heat waves. that is the fundamental nature, of course. So there is a kind of atmospheric tug of war we can predict. And these days people are predicting events for USA more, and for the United States, Cancer is the 12th house. So is the house of the subconscious, hidden subconsciousness and hidden vulnerabilities, and even coastlines or borders can be indicated by 12th house. So it is very interesting to predict for USA also. So with exalted Jupiter triggering heavy water energy in the US 12th house, the country is particularly vulnerable to coastal storms, rising sea levels, and historic hurricane seasons along its borders, especially the Gulf and Atlantic coasts. The 12th house represents the boundaries, basically, where the land meets the outer ocean. It serves as a celestial warning for the USA to reinforce its water infrastructure, dams, and coastal flood defenses during this exact window. And when we are predicting, especially when we are predicting for USA, not to in relation to this heavy rainfalls and water related things, everybody talks about California, because see this, so California is nearer to that the coastal line, that sea. So when assessing whether California is safe during this celestial and meteorological window, then see, from a purely practical weather standpoint, right now California is moving out of its wet winter or spring cycle and into a warmer pattern right now, right? However, because meteorologists are tracking a rapidly developing Elnino and unusually warm Pacific waters, California is facing a highly unique moisture-rich year. And astrologically, when we look at the United States through the lens of a Leo ascendant, California occupies a very distinct space. In mundane astrology, the western coast and California are traditionally ruled by Gemini, and parts of the 4th house, the domestic land, and the 12th house, the coastal boundaries. Now, for the vast majority of residents, daily life will remain completely safe and unimpacted by severe floods during this early summer window. But if you observe the inland and high elevation cities, major metropolitan valleys and higher elevated desert regions are structurally well equipped. The atmospheric water energy will mostly bypass these areas or manifest as brief, intense thunderstorms rather than sustained destructive flooding. And unlike the treacherous rain on snow melting events that happen in the dead of winter, late May and June bring a predictable managed snowmelt. The state's reservoirs are actively monitored to absorb this runoff safely. And if we try to analyze the areas of vulnerability, the pockets to watch, we say, because exalted Jupiter sits in the 12th house of coastal borders here for USA, and Mercury sprints into the turbulent Ardra Nakshatra. California's vulnerabilities are entirely tied to its geographic edges and past scars. I would say the California vulnerability zones for this mid 2026, the northern and central coast, the high surf and coastal erosion, and then southern countries, San Diego, tropical moisture surges, a risk of flash floods in urban or desert areas, and then the hillsides, heavy downpours trigger these generally here. You can expect some mudslides. So overall, see, even meteorologists are warning that the warming Pacific is creating an active tropical pipeline this season. If tropical moisture surges northward from the peninsula, Southern California's urban drainage systems can easily become overwhelmed, leading to sudden flash flooding in low-lying streets. And the burn scars and hillsides. So this is California's primary safety hazard, because Ardra Nakshatra triggers sudden, violent, concentrated downpours rather than steady rain. Any hilly area recently stripped of vegetation by wildfires is highly susceptible to mudslides and debris flows. It doesn't take a week of rain to cause a mudslide. It only takes 30 minutes of an intense cloud burst. And another interesting thing to watch out, the immediate coastline. See, the 12th house rules where the land meets the vast ocean. That is the 12th house. Except, okay, here the 12th house is the land, yeah. So highly erratic coastal conditions, you can say, severe tidal erosion and high surf advisories along the Pacific Coast Highway. See, California is not facing an apocalyptic statewide washing away. The heavy floods globally will hit places like the South Asian monsoon belts much harder. For California, the word is a kind of unpredictable moisture. It will manifest as sudden, sharp tropical pop-up storms that threaten specific coastal and hillside pockets. So, yeah, this is what we can see for that region. And see, we are seeing heavy rainfall due to this Jupiter entering Cancer on 2nd June, right? We're expecting more than heavy rainfall even in India. This is the starting of the season, the monsoon, June, and IMD declared a kind of Elnino this year, in India. So astrologically we're seeing a very, very heavy rainfall, and IMD declared a kind of Elnino. So this is the ultimate clash between the ancient cosmic playbook and modern atmospheric science. And major planets in deep watery signs like Jupiter is in Cancer, Saturn is in Pisces, and Mercury is hitting Ardra Nakshatra. It's indicating an intense, moisture heavy and potentially destructive atmospheric setup. That's what we can see astrologically. But the IMD, Indian Meteorological Department, it's an Elnino alert. Usually, they gave an Elnino alert, of course, and an Elnino alert usually signals a weaker Indian monsoon because it warms the central Pacific Ocean, shifting rain clouds away from South Asia and often leading to drier conditions or a kind of drought in the region. So which one to believe now, astrology or IMD? See, even they actually can both be right at the same time also, because see, El Nino does not mean no rain. It can be erratic rain also. If we think in those lines, then both this IMD and the Vedic astrology can both be right at the same time. So I would say, see, the biggest misconception about El Nino is that it completely shuts off the rain. In reality, meteorologists call El Nino as a disruptor of distribution. So even during an El Nino year, the sheer volume of water in the atmosphere doesn't just vanish, it gets compressed. Instead of a smooth, steady 4-month monsoon distributed evenly across the map, El Nino frequently causes some long dry spells interrupted by sudden, violent, catastrophic downpours over a single city or state, you can say. So we can expect some extreme cloud bursts, some long dry spells, you can see, then suddenly it is interrupted by a very, very big and extreme cloud burst. And you can also expect some flash flooding in India, because the ground gets backed dry during the elongated hot spells. When the rain does hit, the hard earth cannot absorb it, leading to instant severe flash floods. So this mimics the Ardra Nakshatra energy perfectly. Ardra is not a gentle, nurturing rain. It's a teardrop of Rudra. Rudra is a storm god. It represents chaotic, turbulent, and destructive storms. Both science and astrology are pointing to a highly unstable, volatile weather pattern. That's what we can predict. And even the Indian Meteorological Department focuses primarily on the South Asian subcontinent. So an El Nino might suppress overall rainfall averages in India, but it causes historic heavy rainfall and massive flooding elsewhere in the world, or especially I would say the southern United States and California, or the west coast of South America like Peru and Ecuador, and parts of East Africa. So the IMD tracks a drier signal for the Indian subcontinent. The global planetary alignment, that is Jupiter entering Cancer, is simultaneously triggering historic heavy floods on the other side of the planet. So astrology looks at the macro global like energetic pressure here, right? See, while the meteorology tracks the specific local response. That is the difference I can observe here. So even in the history, we had this kind of clashes between the IMD and the astrology. So there have been several recorded El Nino years where the initial forecast predicted a severe drought, but a specific suboceanic or atmospheric anomaly suddenly overrode the El Nino. Meteorologists even track something called the Indian Ocean Dipole. It's called as a Indian El Nino. So if the Indian Ocean warms up significantly, a positive IOD, that is Indian Ocean Dipole, it completely neutralizes the negative effects of El Nino. That's what they tracked. And so if the Indian Ocean warms up significantly, then it completely neutralizes the negative effects of El Nino. That is the advantage. So when this happens, science is caught by a kind of surprise, and a year predicted to be bone dry suddenly turns into a year of heavy, unexpected flooding. So this is what I could see. See, IMD is saying El Nino. That means what it predicts here. is predicting some drier seasonal averages, prolonged heat spells, drought risk in South Asia. That's what they predicted for this year. But see, you get long stretches of intense heat and dry weather which suddenly break into some historic violent multi-day flood events. This is possible. So both might be correct at the same time. That's what I'm saying. The prolonged heat spells broken by a violent flood. So even Ardra is the Mercury hitting Ardra. And according to astrology, I'm seeing Jupiter entering Cancer or Mercury, Ardra, Saturn in Pisces and Revati. So this is indicating heavy water energy only for me. See, atmospheric expansion because Jupiter expands. And severe flooding. I'm seeing severe flooding according to astrology. See, the heavy rainfall fiercely targets some specific global pockets like the US coastlines and South America while causing chaotic pop-up, events in traditionally monsoon heavy areas as well in India also. So the IMD will likely be correct that the overall averages of the season feels disjointed. That's what they meant. Overall average would be lesser. Means prolonged heat spells, prolonged heat the people may experience, some kind of drought for a long period of time, and suddenly hit by a kind of a very big cloud burst or a kind of multi-day flood event. So, right? So when the rain does fall, it will hit with concentrated heavy and flood inducing energy. With that energy it will hit. That's what I can see with this Jupiter entering Cancer. The watery Cancer. Thanks for watching this video.